From creatures that once swung through the forest canopy, they transformed into the first ancient apes. Standing taller, seeing farther, reaching beyond instinct. The forest that once sheltered them began to fade, and the world beyond the trees called out, wide, bright, and unknown. They were no longer just animals of the forest. They had become something more, something that could look at the horizon and wonder. And from that question, from that first spark of awareness, the story of humankind began. In the silence that followed the fall of giants, the earth began again. The dinosaurs had vanished, and in their place, new creatures thrived in the trees. Small, nimble, and endlessly adaptable. For millions of years, they swung from branch to branch, surviving in the chaos of jungles that stretched endlessly across ancient Africa. These were our earliest ancestors, the first primates, living high above the dangers of the ground. Their world was vertical, made of light and leaves. Their hands evolved to grip bark and fruit were their lifeline. They could see in 3 dimensions, calculate distance, and leap with precision, small miracles that evolution had gifted them. But the world beneath the trees was changing. Africa's climate grew drier. The forests began to fade, replaced by open grasslands. And the primates that once depended on branches were forced to adapt to the ground. A strange, new, and dangerous place. It was there between forest and savanna that something extraordinary began. A small creature, no taller than a child, took its first hesitant steps on 2 legs. Its name, discovered millions of years later, would be Sahelanthropus chidensis. It still climbed trees, still sought shelter in the leaves, but it was different. Its spine curved downward, its skull balanced atop the neck. Signs that it could stand, could look farther across the plains. For the first time, a creature was not just surviving the world, but learning to observe it. That simple act, to stand upright, was revolutionary. It freed the hands, allowing them to carry food, to cradle young, to grasp and to create. It changed the way they saw, the way they lived, and eventually the way they thought. To stand was to see farther. To see farther was to imagine beyond what was near. And imagination, though still only a spark, had entered the story of life. From that moment, evolution had found a new path, one not written in muscle or fang, but in awareness. The age of instinct was fading. The age of thought had begun. The world had changed. By 4 million years ago, Africa was no longer a continent of endless forests. Grasslands stretched to the horizon, scattered with acacia trees and herds of grazing beasts. It was a land of sun, wind, and survival. In this new world walked a creature unlike any before, small, fragile, yet extraordinary. Her name, given by us millions of years later, was Lucy. She was part of a species called Australopithecus afarensis. Barely over 1 meter tall, with long arms and curved fingers, she still carried the memory of the trees. But Lucy could do something that no creature before her had mastered. She walked upright. Every step she took was an act of balance, strength, and adaptation. Her pelvis had reshaped, her spine curved into an S, her feet flattened to bear her weight. Evolution had sculpted her body for walking the earth, not climbing its trees. To walk upright meant freedom. Her hands were now free to carry, to hold, to use. She could grasp stones, roots, and branches, not as tools yet, but as possibilities. Each movement planted the seed of creativity that, millions of years later, would grow into invention. Lucy's world was harsh. Predators prowled the savannas, saber-toothed cats, giant birds, crocodiles lurking in the rivers. Yet she survived, not through strength, but through awareness. Her eyes scanned the horizon, her ears caught distant sounds. For the first time, consciousness was becoming She lived in small groups, sharing food and care. Around fires that didn't yet exist, her kind huddled together for safety. The roots of community were forming. Connection, empathy, the first glimpses of what would one day become love. She did not know she was changing the course of history, but each footprint she left behind in the ancient soil, preserved for millions of years, told the story of a creature learning to stand, to move, and to think differently. From her, we inherited not just bones and posture, but the courage to adapt. Lucy's steps were the first rhythm of humanity, a quiet drumbeat echoing through time, leading from the savannas of Africa to the cities of today. The forest had long retreated. Across the plains of East Africa, the air shimmered with heat, and the rhythm of survival grew harsher. Herds of antelope roamed in the distance, and predators waited in the tall grass. It was a world that demanded not only strength, but intelligence. Here a new kind of being emerged. Homo habilis, the handyman. Shorter than us with a slightly larger brain than Lucy's kind, they were different. Thinkers trapped in bodies still learning what to do with thought. They picked up stones, not just to throw, but to shape. One by one, they learned to strike them together, chipping away sharp edges that could cut meat, split bone, or carve wood. For the first time, the natural world was being transformed by deliberate design. The first tool was more than an object. It was an idea, a thought made solid, a sign that something entirely new had entered the story of life: intention. They learned that a sharp edge meant survival. With tools, they could scavenge the kills of larger predators, break open bones for the rich marrow inside, and access new sources of food that no creature before had touched. And with food came energy. Their brains grew larger, hungrier for ideas as much as for meat. Each generation built upon the discoveries of the last, passing knowledge, gesture by gesture, spark by spark. Fire was not yet theirs, but the thought of control had begun. For the first time, the mind looked at nature and asked, what if? What if we could shape stone? What if we could tame flame? From those questions came the birth of curiosity. Curiosity led to invention, and invention to survival. Evolution was no longer just a process of nature. It had become a partnership between biology and thought. The earth was still vast, the dangers unending, but something had shifted forever. For the first time, life on this planet had begun to shape its own destiny. The sun was setting over the ancient plains of Africa. Long shadows stretched across the land as a group of travelers gathered around something glowing. Not the sun, but a small, flickering flame. It hissed, crackled, and danced. And for the first time, Homo erectus watched fire, not as a force of destruction, but as an ally. Fire changed everything. It cooked food, making it softer, safer, and more nourishing. It brought warmth in the cold, light in the dark, and safety against predators that once ruled the night. Around the fire, fear receded, and something new took its place: connection. In the glow of those early flames, the first conversations began. They were not words as we know them, but gestures, sounds, rhythms, the beginnings of language. The crackle of fire gave cadence to meaning. A shared gaze became a story. Fire was more than warmth. It was memory. Each night, around its circle of light, experiences were shared. The young learned from the old, and for the first time, knowledge began to pass between generations. With fire, Homo erectus expanded their world. They ventured beyond Africa, to the Middle East, to Asia, even to the islands beyond. Their bodies grew taller, stronger, built for endurance. Their minds, too, burned brighter, adapting to cold, to hunger, to the unknown. They learned to plan, to hunt in groups, to build shelters, to store food. For the first time, life was not just about surviving today, but preparing for tomorrow. Around the fire, humanity began to see itself. The flickering light reflected in their eyes, and perhaps, for the first time, one of them looked into those glowing embers and saw something more. A thought, a dream, a question. Who are we? Where do we come from? What lies beyond the darkness? The questions burned as fiercely as the fire itself. And so, fire became more than survival. It became spirit, the symbol of warmth, of light, of knowledge. From that day on, wherever humanity went, fire followed, as a reflection of the light within. With flame, we lit the night. With thought, we began to light the future. Something new stirred in the minds of our ancestors. Around 300,000 years ago, in the heart of Africa, a species emerged, taller, leaner, with a skull more rounded and a brain nearly identical to ours. They were called Homo sapiens. the wise ones. But what made them truly human was not their bones. It was their minds. Within those skulls burned the spark of imagination, the power to see not just what was, but what could be. They began to dream. They painted symbols on cave walls: horses, bison, human hands pressed in red ochre. They carved bones into flutes and necklaces. They told stories beneath the stars, stories of spirits, ancestors, and gods. These acts were more than decoration. They were expressions of thought, reflections of a mind aware of itself. Humanity had discovered something no other creature had: meaning. They began to bury their dead, to place flowers, tools, or offerings beside the fallen, signs that they understood life's greatest mystery: death. From that understanding came compassion, grief, and hope. Around fires, words formed. Sounds turned into language, into names, promises, and prayers. Through language, thought could travel, memory could endure, and imagination could take shape. They looked at the night sky and wondered if something greater watched back. The stars became maps, myths, and metaphors, connecting heaven to earth, dream to purpose. From imagination came belief, and from belief came civilization. Art, religion, and cooperation became the tools of survival, not just for the body, but for the soul. The world was still dangerous, but now humanity had something no predator could overcome: unity through story. They could rally, plan, and dream together, an ability that would let them shape the destiny of the planet itself. In the flicker of firelight, imagination became evolution's greatest weapon. It lifted humanity from the savannah to the stars. By 100,000 years ago, humanity began to move. Across deserts, mountains, and oceans, they walked, carrying fire, language, and memory. Each migration a gamble with nature, each step a declaration: we belong everywhere. They spread into the Middle East, Europe, Asia, and beyond. Wherever they went, they adapted. Skin darkened or lightened, eyes shaped to sunlight and snow. Culture evolved faster than biology. Tools became symbols. Shelters became homes. They met other humans, the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they loved. In those brief moments of union, they shared more than shelter. They shared genes, stories, and futures. From these encounters, we inherited resilience, endurance, and diversity, a blend of survival written in our DNA. Every human alive today carries whispers of those ancient cousins. Civilization began not with kings or temples, but with cooperation. As humans gathered in larger groups, they learned to plant, to build, to plan. Villages became cities, language became law, and stories, the same stories told by firelight, became the foundations of belief and order. Egypt rose on the Nile. Mesopotamia bloomed between rivers. China, India, and Greece reached for wisdom. The age of civilization had begun, an era where imagination turned into architecture and thought became technology. In only a few thousand years, we went from stone to steel, from torchlight to electricity, from walking the earth to walking on the moon. No other species had ever altered its world so completely. But even as we conquered nature, we began to turn our gaze inward, to the universe within. We mapped the mind, decoded DNA, and built machines that could think. The next chapter of evolution was no longer written by nature, but by us. From those forest-dwelling primates to the beings who gaze at the stars, the story of humanity is one of courage, curiosity, and endless imagination. Our ancestors once feared the dark. Now we light up the universe with our questions. Where did we come from? And where will we go next? Perhaps the answer is still unfolding, written by you, by me, and by all of us, the humans of today and the ancestors of tomorrow.